Morning, students. Very sorry for the delayed start of the class. There were some technical issues with the net, and the PowerPoint was not starting properly. Very sorry. Initially, I'd seen around 120 people entered the class, but now they're just 110 or 107 people now. Please ask your friends to log in. The class is starting now. Okay, so the last class I just ended up with just naming the pre-malignant conditions of the oral cavity. I shall name them again for you. It's already discussed. They are leukoplakia, erythroplakia, chronic hyperplastic candidiasis, oral submucosal fibrosis, syphilitic glossitis, sideropenic dysphagia, oral lichen planus, discoid lupus erythematosus, keratosis congenita. Out of these, the first 6 were already discussed in the last class. So I would not be discussing much about the pre-malignant conditions in this class. I shall just categorize them for you. The very high risk lesions which have a definite risk of malignant change are leukoplakia, erythroplakia, and chronic hyperplastic candidiasis, already discussed in the last class. The other categories are just the medium risk with the pre-malignant change, but not associated with higher incidence. They don't have a high incidence of carcinoma. Under these, they come the oral submucosal fibrosis, syphilitic glossitis, and sideropenic dysphagia. The sideropenic dysphagia is because of iron deficiency without anemia, or it's called Plummer-Vinson syndrome. The sideropenia is common in Scandinavian females more common. It causes atrophy of the epithelium and then becomes potentially malignant in the oral cavity. So simple iron therapy will control the disease and also reduce the risk of malignant transformation. It carries medium risk of malignant transformation. Okay. Now, equivocal risk lesions are oral lichen planus, disc keratosis congenita, and discoid lupus erythematosus. Okay. So coming to the oropharyngeal cancers, the topic of our discussion for today. What is the oropharynx? Oropharynx, or the upper aerodigestive tract. The oropharynx, it extends vertically from the oral cavity in the soft palate and the oral cavity to the superior surface of the hyoid bone, almost inside up to the floor of vallecula. Okay, so it will include the tongue, the soft palate, anterior and posterior tonsillar pillars, the pharyngeal tonsils, and then the lateral and posterior pharyngeal walls. The lateral boundaries of this would be the pharyngeal constrictor muscles. Okay. The medial most aspect is the mandible. Now here I have depicted the common anatomical sites for oral squamous cell carcinoma. Okay, up to the from the retromolar trigon to the floor of the mouth, the tongue. Now this would be a little bit repetition. The various risk factors that are associated with the cancer of head and neck region, as you already know: tobacco, alcohol, areca nut. The viral factors could be human papillomavirus HPV or EB virus, Epstein-Barr virus, Plummer-Vinson syndrome already told to you, and poor nutrition deficiencies, poor nutrition or vitamin deficiencies. Now this use of pan, which is nothing but a combination of betel nut and areca nut with lime and tobacco within, and also reverse smoking, where a smoking with a cheroot, burning end inside the mouth, is also quite commonly practiced in the rural areas. So these are the risk factors for the development of cancers in the oral cavity and the oropharynx. Now, oral cavity malignancies is one of the commonest cancer in Asian countries and also in India, almost according to about 40%. What is the pathology here? The facial planes, including the periosteum, which form barriers to the direct spread, but they also contribute to the spread of tumors into the cervical lymph nodes, direct spread to the cervical lymph nodes. Now, when there is a peritoneal invasion, which is a conduit for direct spread, this will profoundly affect the prognosis and survival of the patient. Now, angioinvasion also carries a negative prognosis, and this correlates directly with distant metastasis. So, you have angioinvasion, you will definitely have distant metastasis, and hence bad prognosis. This is more commonly seen in tongue, oral tongue, that is the anterior 2/3 of the tongue cancers. Now, what is the histology of these cancers? Most commonly, they are squamous cell carcinomas only. Sometimes, when there is involvement of the minor salivary glands, tumors of these regions, then you can have adenocarcinomas, which are quite rare. The next, almost third in the category, would be lymphomas around the Valder's ring. What is this Valder's ring? The lymphoid tissue in the oral cavity, almost the oropharynx. It includes the Valder's ring will include the 4 tonsils and also the lymphoid tissues. Now, this is a very important concept. Field change or field cancerization is a very important topic which will explain the occurrence of a second primary tumor in the oral cavity. Second primary tumors are very common in the oral cavity malignancies. It accounts to almost 15%. How does that happen? How is that explained? Because of the nature of the diffuse and chronic exposure of the mucosa of the upper aerodigestive tract to the carcinogenic substances that we have already discussed before, like betel nut, tobacco, alcohol, there is widespread adverse changes in the mucosal epithelium. Now, this causes development of separate tumors at different anatomical sites. There are separate tumors at different anatomical sites which have the same clonal origin of cells, and then they migrate to separate sites. So they have the same clonal origin, but they are different sites. So when these will occur simultaneously, almost within range of 6 months, then it is called synchronous lesions. Or if it is delayed beyond 6 months, it would be called metachronous lesions. Metachronous lesions are more common, that is beyond 6 months you get to see second primary tumors in the oral cavity. For example, the patient who developed a first tumor in the oral cavity is more likely to develop a second primary tumor in the upper esophagus. The same etiological factors that cause the first primary tumor is the causative agent for the second primary tumors also. So this concept is quite important and noteworthy. Okay. What is the risk for potential transformation into a malignancy? So this risk increases with the increase of the age of the patient, also the duration of the lesion. It is higher in smokers, and it also increases with increased alcohol consumption, and it depends on the anatomical site of the premalignant lesions. Particularly, it is high for leukoplakia on the floor of the mouth and the ventral surface of the tongue. The risk is 8 times more in tobacco chewers, where it is 10 times more in quid chewers. Night quid chewers, it is 30 times more, because night time it is lodged in the in the alveolar sulcus, buccoalveolar sulcus. So it is 30 times more. That is increased duration of exposure of the carcinogen in the oral cavity. So it is 30 times more than night quid users. Alcohol increases solubility of carcinogens, and then this suppresses the DNA repair, and hence there is carcinogenesis. The commonest oral cavity malignancy in India, it is of the buccal mucosa. Elsewhere, it is tongue. Okay. In India, first is buccal mucosa, then comes tongue. In the West, the commonest is in the tongue, almost accounting to 50%. Next common is buccal mucosa, followed by floor of the mouth, and then gums in the West. Now, classification and staging is also important. Now, staging and classification always for treatment and prognosis. Okay. So, the staging of the head and neck cancer is defined by the AJCC, also called the American Joint Committee on Cancer. And this follows the TNM system, that is tumor, node, and metastasis system. The T classification, it indicates the extent of the primary tumor, that is the size and the extent of the primary tumor. The N classification, it relates to the involvement of regional lymph nodes, the lymph nodes that are first involved in the malignancy. It is identical for all the mucosal sites of the head and neck except for the nasopharynx. Now, the N classification relates to distant metastasis. The risk of distant metastasis is dependent on the nodal disease rather than the size of the primary tumor. Okay, the primary tumor may be small, but when there is nodal disease, then you can have chances of distant metastasis occurring. Now, this is how you categorize the T. T0, no evidence of primary tumor. Carcinoma in situ is TIS. T1, when tumor size is less than 2 centimeters in the greatest dimension. T2, when size of tumor is between 2 to 4 centimeters, greater than 4 and less than 6 centimeters, it is T3. T4 is when, whatever be the size of the tumor, when it invades the adjacent structures involved, adjacent structures like the mandible and skin, then it is definitely T4. Okay. Next, coming to regional lymph nodes. NX, anywhere, regional lymph nodes cannot be assessed. N0, no lymph nodes. N1, when the metastasis in the regional lymph nodes is on the same side, that is ipsilateral lymph node, but it is less than 3 centimeters in the greatest dimension, it is N1. Now N2, same side, but 3 to 6 centimeters in size. 2B, same side, not more than 6 centimeters in the same side. Now T2 N2C, both bilateral on both sides, or on the opposite side the lymph nodes, but not greater than 6 centimeters. Less than 6 centimeters, it will be N2 always. So metastasis in any lymph node, whether on the same side or on the opposite side, but the size is greater than 6 centimeters, is definitely under N3. Okay. Now N0 is no distant metastasis. N1 is evidence of that is distant metastasis. Now staging is important, wherein this T and M categories are divided. Stage 1 is T1. Stage 2 is T2, where N0 there is no nodal and distant metastasis. T3, it is stage 3. Also, when there is lymph nodal involvement, it comes under stage 3. Now stage 4, T4 comes under stage 4. Also, N2 and N3 disease comes under stage 4, and distant metastasis comes under the last stage, stage 4. Okay, you just have to by heart this, there is no other goal. Okay, for now, the regional lymph nodes are definitely the cervical lymph nodes. Head and neck region, the cervical lymph nodes form the regional lymph nodes. So for this, you have to know, you have to have an idea, very important, about the levels of classification of the cervical lymph nodes. Okay, the level 1 lymph nodes are nothing but the submental and the submandibular lymph nodes. Okay, that's 1A submental, 1B would be submandibular. 1A submental, 1B is the submandibular lymph nodes. Now, the posterior boundary of the submandibular gland will delineate from level 1 from level 2. Now, level 2 is along from the skull base up to the lower border of the hyoid bone. Okay, nothing but the upper jugulodigastric lymph nodes. These are all the deep cervical lymph nodes. Next, level 2 would be the middle jugular, from the hyoid bone up to the cricoid, the lower margin of the cricoid cartilage. This would be level 3. Level 4 is the lower jugular, from the cricoid up to the clavicle. Okay, this is a level 4. All these are anterior to the sternocleidomastoid. Next, posterior one is behind the sternocleidomastoid, is divided and is under level 5. Again, superior border from the cricoid, upper border of the cricoid to the clavicle below. Level 6 is the prelaryngeal and pretracheal lymph nodes, the anterior group. Next, level 7 will be the upper mediastinal lymph nodes. Okay, so this is how the levels of cervical lymph nodes is made. What is the patterns of the lymph node metastasis in oral cavity malignancies? Most commonly, I said, it is squamous cell carcinomas in the oral cavity and lips. It is to the level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1, submental and submandibular, upper jugulodigastric, and the middle jugulodigastric. oral tongue, they may have, or apart from these, they may have skip lesions to skip metastasis to levels 3 and 4 without involving the higher lymph nodal group. Now, tumors in the oropharynx can also have involve the level 2, 3 and 4 along with the retropharyngeal and opposite side contralateral lymph nodes also, the oropharynx. Okay. Distant spread is more commonly seen in the nasopharyngeal carcinomas. Okay. The order of incidence of nodal spread is highest in the tongue and least of the palate. Floor of the mouth, alveolus, cheek, and upper alveolus, lower alveolus, they form an order of lymph nodal spread. Now, these are another important topic, nomenclature, wherein you find hard secondaries in the neck with an unknown primary is one category. Secondly, hard secondaries in the neck with an occult primary. Okay, so what is this unknown primary and occult primary? Now, when the primary is very small and can be detected clinically, it cannot be detected clinically, but on investigations, you can know, you can estimate, you can categorize, maybe it could be from the pyriform fossa or the nasopharynx and the posterior third of tongue. But clinically, it is not, there is no swellings that you can see directly in these regions. There is no clinical presentation of primary from these regions. But the patient will simply present to you with hard lymph nodal secondaries in the neck. Okay, then it is called secondaries with an unknown primary. So when you investigate, you get to know about the primary location of the malignancy to be in the pyriform fossa or the nasopharynx or the posterior third of the tongue, that is the pharyngeal part. Now, the second entity is wherein the patient presents with hard secondaries in the neck, but all the investigations, including blind biopsies, the CT of the head and neck regions, and endoscopies, nothing could identify the primary lesion. Then it is called an occult primary. This is almost according to about 30% of all the lymph nodal secondaries cases. Okay. Now, oropharyngeal malignancies, what are the commonest clinical features? Patient may present with trismus, wherein the pterygoid muscle, when involved, there is difficulty in opening of the mouth. Ear pain due to auriculotemporal nerve involvement, that is referred pain to the ear. We can also have eye pain in the case of nasopharyngeal carcinomas. Dysphagia is because of involvement of the tongue, mainly the posterior third. When involved, there is definite dysphagia, difficulty in swallowing. When the malignancy will spread to the eustachian tube, then there can also be hearing loss. So what are the commonest management modalities? First thing, you go for the biopsy of the primary. When you're able to see the primary lesion, go for a biopsy and an FNAC of the lymph node if involved, when involved. Next management modalities would be to go for an endoscopy. Okay. Further, CT neck and MRI. CT neck when you feel that there is involvement of the bone, the mandible. Then a CT neck, MRI to estimate the involvement of the soft tissue levels. Chest X-ray for distant metastasis. Okay. Staging, as I already told you, is important to plan the treatment and predict the prognosis. What are the treatment options? You will have surgical biodexation and radiotherapy forming the main modalities of treatment. The others could be chemotherapy as an adjuvant. Curative treatment and early growth with preservation of functions should be your goal. So the patient should be able to swallow, should be able to communicate, should be articulate speech, and for cosmetic reasons. So these are the main goals that we go for treatment in the early curative stages. Radiotherapy is also curative in some of the cancers. Okay. Chemotherapy would be palliative. Radiotherapy and surgery can be done depending on the location of the lesion. Now, when the mandible is involved, the neck node is involved, the number of the neck nodes, all this will give you staging of the disease, and hence the prognosis. Okay. Lip always carries a better prognosis and tongue has a poor prognosis. Now, what are the sites of carcinoma oral cavity in the order? In India, as I already told you, it is cheek, the commonest. In the Western countries, tongue. In India, after cheek, it's followed by tongue, then the floor of the mouth, palate, and lips. Coming to the carcinoma of the gingival buccal complex, which is nothing but the upper from the upper to lower alveolus, from commission in front to the retromolar trigone behind. Okay, so this region is covered under gingival buccal complex. It is mostly squamous cell carcinoma involving the buccal mucosa and the gingiva. Again, etiology is the same factors you have to mention: tobacco, quid, alcohol. So when this tobacco and quid is kept in this sulcus, it is more common. It is called Indian oral cancer, most commonly seen in India. Sometimes it could be adenocarcinoma that is arising from the floor of the mouth containing minor salivary gland or mucous glands. This is a clinical picture. The buccal mucosa showing an ulcerative lesion. What are the precipitating factors? Again, the 6 S's that I have told you in the last class: smoking, spirit, syphilis, spirit is nothing but alcohol, syphilis, sharp tooth, sepsis, and spices. It is 6 times more in smokers than in non-smokers. Betel nut chewing, important causative factors. Pan with the pan quid, that is the on chewing whatever you get, that is called the quid, that is kept in the cheek pouch for a long time. Okay, these are the clinical pictures. Ulcerative growth, and this that is seen is the buccal mucosa being eroded from inside onto the skin. What are the various types of these buccal mucosal cancers? One, it could be ulcerative, proliferative, exophytic, verrucous. Verrucous is more common. It occurs as superficial proliferative exophytic lesion with a minimal deep invasion. Often they could be multiple. On clinical examination, the lesion has a white, dry, velvety or warty, keratinized surface. It is commonly seen in females. It is well differentiated squamous cell carcinoma of low grade variety, but it is locally malignant. Most of the time it does not have a lymphatic spread. After biopsy, the treatment is wide excision. Okay. Now, what is the biological behavior for carcinoma cheek? The carcinoma is more common in the posterior half of the cheek than in the anterior, because that is the area where you have the maximum exposure of the carcinogens. It spreads in a deeper plane to involve the buccinator muscles and the pterygoids into the retromolar trigone, and also up to the base of the skull and into the pharynx. Okay, so it spreads outwards to involve the skin also. From inside to outside, it may involve the skin, causing fungation, ulceration, and sometimes orocutaneous fistula formation. Ultimately, you have seen in the picture. The bony involvement of the mandible is either by direct extension or through spread from the periosteal, subperiosteal lymphatic plexus, which these usually communicate freely with the oral lymphatics. That's why it spreads to the mandible. Now, the common lymph nodes are again submental, submandibular, and the upper deep cervical, and sometimes the lateral pharyngeal, inside the lateral pharyngeal. The seen in 50% of the cases, nodal spread. Now, this infection, if then there is secondary infection of the ulcer, the tumor area, it spreads to the soft tissues, and then the patient may present with, along with the swelling and the ulcer, he has presentation of fever and foul smelling and halitosis. Respiratory infection may also be common. I told you the retromolar trigone is the coffin corner. So when this is involved, you also have the involvement of the soft palate and the pharynx. And then the patient here presents with dysphagia additionally. Swelling for more than 3 weeks, oral swelling. Sometimes ulceration in the mouth will be seen for more than 3 weeks duration. Difficulty swallowing, painless neck lump when present, suspect cervical lymph nodal metastasis, unexplained tooth mobility, trismus. These are the various clinical features that the patient will present with buccal mucosal cancer. Halitosis is nothing but bad breath, which is bad odored breath. in common in many oral cancers. This is because of the necrosis of the tumor with the release of mercaptans and butyric acid and ammonia. So this is the cause for the bad breath. Now the involvement of retromolar trigone indicates that it is an advanced stage, obviously. So the lymphatics here communicate freely with the pharyngeal lymphatics that I told you before. So the superior pharyngeal constrictor muscles are also may also be involved when the retromolar trigone is involved. How do you examine the mandible? It is examined bidigitally for noting for thickness, tenderness, and irregularity, and also any pathological fractures if present. These cervical lymph nodes in the submandibular region and the deep cervical, upper deep cervical nodes may either be mobile or fixed. When they are fixed, it goes into N2 or N3. Once when the lymph nodes are fixed, then they may infiltrate into the surrounding nerves. The hypoglossal nerve, then the tongue will deviate towards the same side. Okay, spinal accessory nerve. Then there is defective shrugging of the shoulder. When it involves when the cervical fixed cervical lymph nodes infiltrate the cervical sympathetic chain, then there is Horner syndrome on that side. External carotid artery when involved, it causes. Initially, there is absence of superficial temporal artery pulsations, and further infiltration will cause carotid blowouts. Again, the TNM staging, we have to mention it here also, the same that I mentioned before. This would definitely be T4, tumor staging of this disease, T4, wherein there is extensive involvement of the adjacent structures, namely the skin and maybe also the mandible. Okay. Now, there is recognized risk of contralateral neck metastasis even in well-lateralized tumors of the oral tongue. So the same side, single side tumors, when they involve, they may also be present on the contralateral opposite side neck lymph nodes. What are the investigations? I told you, initially you have to go for an edge biopsy from the primary tumor. This edge biopsy should be taken from, ideally taken from two sides. It should not be taken from the center. It should be taken from the edges. Better wedge biopsy it's called. So from the edge, because this is the area where there is active proliferation of the tumor cells. But the center has necrosis. But sometimes you may have to take it from the center when there is recurrence. In recurrence cases, there is no problem if you take it from the center, but most commonly you have to take the biopsies from the periphery, that is the edge of the ulcer. What do you see under histologically? You get to see the malignant squamous cells that have epithelial pearls or keratin pearls. These are the keratin pearls, the whorls of keratinized epithelial cells. Now there is broader histological grading where it is called, the tumor is called well differentiated when you get to see more than 75% of epithelial pearls. And when there is less than 25% of epithelial pearls in the field of the slide, then it is categorized under very poorly differentiated. Again, followed by to confirm whether the lymph nodes that are involved is because of the primary metastasis or because of secondary infection. So you have to go for a fine needle aspiration cytology, FNAC. Also, the radiology of the jaw. This facilitates the dental assessment apart from the involvement of the bone as a result of invasion. The other examination being ultrasound. MRI, I told you, it is investigation of choice of the oral cavity, oropharynx and neck, because this gives you an excellent visualization of the soft tissue infiltration. CT, when you suspect the involvement of the bone, that is the mandible, then you have to go for a CT. It is indicated in all patients now, not just with the involvement of the cervical lymph nodes, but you also have to take a CT to rule out the involvement of bone in almost all the cases, whether or not there is presence of cervical lymph nodes. Now PET-CT, these are all advanced. You don't have to go for the PET-CT in all cases. What is a PET-CT? Wherein you use a tracer element I'm so sorry, there was some problem. I don't think I'd done it myself. It just went on itself. And are you able to see the PPT now? I think I've unmuted my mic. Okay. Can you see the PPT? No, you're not able to see the PPT also. Oh my God. So I think, yeah, are you able to see the PPT now? Yes. Can someone tell me where you missed seeing me? Like the PPT and my voice? I was just going on myself. So did you all listen to these points? Yes. Can someone tell me from which slide you were not able to see? You could all see these, right? The various surgical incisions for excision, the different mandibular resections you were able to see, right? Reconstruction part, shall I? No. 106. Can you please tell me? One Radhika Soni, please can you tell me from which part you were not able to see? Just type that for me. Did you get to see the mandibular resections? No. Okay. So shall I repeat it from there? Different mandibular resections. You're able to see the Weisser approach and all, right? So I'll start with the mandibular resections. Okay with everyone, right? Thank you. I'm so sorry. These technical problems are quite difficult for me to manage. Okay. So I told you about the wide local excision of the primary tumor is done with the various approaches that I've told you before. This would involve plus or minus the mandibular resections. So the mandibular resections, the different types would be marginal, partial, segmental, hemimandibulectomy, or the rim resection. So the marginal mandibulectomy, it is done in continuation with the wide excision of the primary tumor, wherein the margin of the mandible and on the superior margin is removed, such that after removal of the tumorous or the infiltrated region, you are left with minimum of 1 centimeter mandible from the inferior margin. So this is the marginal mandibulectomy. Second variety of mandibulectomy is segmental resection of the mandible, wherein a segment of the mandible on the side involved is removed from the mental foramen up to the angle of the mandible. So this is a segment of the mandible that is removed. Next is partial mandibulectomy, wherein mandible on the involved side is removed from the mental foramen up to the condylite process, line of the condylite process, including the process, but you will have to, coronary process is removed, the condylite process is left behind. So this is partial mandibulectomy. Hemimandibulectomy, where the mandible on one side is entirely removed from the temporomandibular joint from up to the anterior half of the mandible. So the half of the mandible on one side is entirely removed. This is hemimandibulectomy. Most commonly commando operation, it's done. So now once you remove certain soft tissues and the mandible, the bony part, you'll have to reconstruct those areas, right? So the reconstruction will range from simple skin grafting to flaps or the mandibular reconstruction, wherein a cortical bony graft is used, or you can also use ribs or fibula. Also, instead of the bone, you can use a synthetic material, that is titanium or stainless steel plate. More commonly, the flaps that are used are free fibular flap, radial forearm flap, and anterolateral thigh flaps. Okay. What are the various flaps? You have to know the names. Forehead flap. A flap should always be pedicled. It is most commonly pedicled, containing the artery that supplies the musculocutaneous flap. So the forehead flap, which is based on the superficial temporal artery. The deltopectoral flap, it is based on the first, second, and third perforating vessels from the internal mammary. So the deltopectoral flap. All these are examples of myocutaneous flaps. Another one is pectoralis major myocutaneous flap, which is based on thoracoacromial artery. Thoracoacromial artery. Okay. Free microvascular flaps may be from the radial artery of the forearm flaps. Okay. Small defects, you can simply reconstruct them with a tongue flap or a buccal flap, the same side buccal flap, or a palatal flap. Mucoperiosteal, this hard palate, the mucoperiosteal flap can simply cover the buccal defect. This is an example wherein the osteocutaneous fibular flap has been used to reconstruct. There is extensive squamous cell carcinoma of the anterior mandible involving the floor of the mouth. Here there is bony destruction that is shown, that is involvement of the mandible also. Post-operatively, they had used a fibular myocutaneous, osteocutaneous flap, fibular flap to reconstruct, and hence this is the post-operative radiograph. What are the indications for surgery? Initially small sized early tumors, yes. Tumors spreading to the mandible bone or alveolus, yes, you can go for surgery. When there is fungation and hemorrhage deterioration, you have to go for a surgery to prevent, to give a palliation, you have to go for simple excision. You don't have to go for an extensive surgery there because there is already morbidity that has been caused because of the tumor. So just to palliate, you have to go for a surgery in such cases. When there is recurrence of the tumor after radiotherapy, yes, it is an indication for surgery. Also involvement of multiple sites. Locally advanced, but it is amenable to surgery, then yes, you have to go for surgery. So prime indication is surgical. Resection, if possible, should undergo surgeries. What is the advantage? Definitely the control of the primary tumor. Apart from that, there is alleviation, pain control, when curative. All this is when curative. When there is palliation, yes, there is pain control. There is prevention of fungation or ulceration, the secondary changes, and potential bleeding, I told you, can be prevented. This is in case of advanced diseases. What are the disadvantages of surgery? For any surgery, you have to say, yes, there will be anesthesia complications, and this is general anesthesia you have to do. So anesthetic complications are there, bleeding, again infection. Second, most important is flap necrosis. When the flap coverage has a poor blood supply, has not been pedicled properly, then yes, there is flap necrosis. Also, the primary closure, when the edges are not properly vascularized, yes, there can be flap necrosis. Always, surgical excision would require reconstruction. There is definite morbidity and mortality. Also, problems of neck dissection like injury to the hypoglossal nerve, the spinal accessory nerve, the phrenic nerve will be there. On the left side, the thoracic duct injury. On either side, when there is infiltration onto the carotids and then there is inadvertent carotid injury, there would be carotid blowout. Since there is lymphatic destruction that you do, there would definitely be lymphedema post-operatively with the neck and face, may extend onto the limb, upper limb. What is role of chemotherapy? I told you either to downstage the disease or for palliation in unresectable tumors. Okay. So what are the drugs used? They are methotrexate, cisplatin, vincristine, bleomycin, and adriamycin. These are the drug names that you can just mention. They're given either IV or orally, also intra-arterially. What are the problems with chemotherapy? This is a broad category. You should know for every lesion. Yes, there is bone marrow suppression. There may be megaloblastic anemia. It can be GI symptoms like diarrhea. Hepatotoxicity and renal toxicity is always anticipated. Alopecia, hair loss, nausea, vomiting is very common with chemotherapeutic drugs. And then would be severe stomatitis. So I told you radiotherapy, brachytherapy, most probably will not have systemic complications, but when it can be given as a curative or palliation therapy. So what are the problems with radiation? Radiotherapy, there's definite loss of taste sensation and dryness, xerostomia. Secondly, there would be mucositis and hence infection and then dental diseases. It could lead to skin excoriation. When patient had trismus, that would be aggravated. It can cause dysphagia by itself because of laryngeal edema. If the neck is irradiated, then there could be every chances of occurrence of hypothyroidism. Carotid artery atherosclerosis, there could be visual impairment when involved on the eye regions, and soft tissue fibrosis. Now, carcinoma lip. Do you have any doubts so far? Since we started the class, I've taken permission. I'll just finish off with carcinoma lip also. I hope you're able to hear me and see the screen, right? Yeah. So incidence of carcinoma lip is 15% of all the head and neck cancers, and it is 1% of all the cancers. It may rise from the mammalian surface or from the mucosal part. The mammalian surface is the outer surface or from the mucosal part. It is common after 40 years of age. In younger group, yes, if it is present, then it has a poor prognosis. But commonly, carcinoma of the lip has better prognosis compared to all the other malignancies in the oral cavity. It is common in whites, it is rare in blacks. And it is most commonly seen in kinetours, wherein there is a mixture of tobacco and lime kept under the lip here. So that is what causes the irritation and then dysplastic changes. So obviously again the etiological agents for any oral cancers, you have to mention all the S's as the predisposing factors. Okay. It is more common in the lower lip. If it is present on the upper lip, then it is usually lower lip. It is usually squamous cell carcinomas only. If it is of the upper lip, a different etiology, exposure to the sunlight, ultraviolet radiation, that causes basal cell carcinoma more commonly. It's also seen in pipe smokers, the one who smoke pipe using pipes, so the lips are commonly involved. How does it start? It starts as a red, granular dry lesion, which eventually gets ulcerated and forms an ulcer-proliferative lesion. It may also occur in the angle of the mouth. Okay, I told you it is a well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma, hence there is a good prognosis. Well-differentiated carcinomas usually carry good prognosis. At the upper lip, that is basal cell carcinoma. Commissure tumors, 2% of all the lip cancers, but they have a higher rate of lymph nodal spread. It is well localized over the lip. So a depth of more than 5 millimeters, then you can anticipate a spread to the lymph nodes. Most commonly it is the submental or the submandibular, the level 1 group of lymph nodes. I told you the clinical features. Initially there would be a small ulceration. It is painless to begin with. Then there is proliferation, non-healing and everted edges with induration of the surrounding lip. So this growth moves along with the lip. Submental, submandibular, or sometimes the upper deep cervical jugular lymph nodes also can be involved. When they are tender, it is mostly due to infection. Initially, they would be hard, non-tender only because of carcinomatous invasion. But when there is infection, yes, they can be pain. Secondary changes of fungation and bleeding on touch over the ulcer can also be seen. What are the differential diagnosis? Just name them: keratoacanthoma, basal cell carcinoma, minor salivary gland tumors. It is extension. Usually, carcinoma of the lip can be an extension from the carcinoma of the cheek also. If the ulcer is pigmented, then a differential diagnosis of malignant melanoma can also be made. Again, the diagnosis, you have to mention this commonly for all the oral cavities, malignancies. First, make a biopsy of the primary lesion and on the edges, not from the center. Then FNAC of the involved lymph nodes. Here, treatment modalities, when the lesion is less than 2 centimeters, then you can simply give curative radiotherapy. That is either brachytherapy or external beam radiation. It gives a good cure. Also, if it is less than 2 centimeters, you can go for simple wide local excision. If tumor is more than 2 centimeters, then yes, you can attempt for wide local excision, wherein it is involved in the lower lip, then lower lip up to less than 1/3 of the lip is involved. Then you can go for wide local excision, such that after excision, the line of suture should involve with all the 3 layers. Okay, the vermilion border should be properly aligned. The vermilion border should be properly aligned without causing microstomia. After surgery, after you have removed, the patient should not be complaining of small mouth difficulty in opening the mouth, right? Excision of more than 1/3 of the lip will obviously require reconstruction procedures. Here, see this primary repair of the lip after wide excision of the small tumor. The small tumor was excised, and there is simple primary approximation of the edges. This is done in 2 layers. The first layer is the mucomuscular layer. That is the mucosa and the muscular layer, which is done with an absorbable suture. Mucosa always absorbable sutures. Second layer is non-absorbable monofilamentous sutures like Prolene should be used. The second, wherein the skin is closed, you can use a non-absorbable suture material. So this has to be a layered closure. This is how the skin edges are marked. Either V or W-shaped incision is given, and a plasty is done for the approximation. Okay. When there are large central defects, then it is a step ladder procedure. Here, Johnson step ladder reconstruction is done using the submental, the lip and labiomental flaps. Okay, a good approximation has been achieved. And there's extensive tumors of the lower lip, almost T4. Then you have to use a flap. When here, this picture shows excision of the lower chin. Along with the lower lip, the lower chin has been excised, and neck dissection on the left side. Functional neck dissection on the left side. And then for reconstruction, they have used a radial forearm flap. Okay, forearm flap using the radial artery, based on the radial artery. This is the flap to close the defect. Post-operative picture shows a good reconstruction procedure. Now, there are certain named flaps in the lip reconstruction. You just have to try to remember the names and what has been done. Okay, the IBS Lander rotation flaps, modified Bernard facial flap, microvascular flaps, cheek flap, IB flap, and W-plasty, Gill's fan flap. These are some of the important named flaps for this construction of the lip. I think I'll stop it here. We'll just continue in the next class. Are there any doubts so far? I'll tell you about all these flaps in the next class, because I think somebody is waiting. I'm not very sure. Do you have any doubts, children? Shall we finish up with the flaps till somebody else comes, the next teacher comes? Okay. I think somebody's come. I'll stop it here. I presume you have no doubts. Please go through these topics covered so far in oral cavity. You can always ask me doubts in the next class also. Okay. Thank you.